Hi, I'm Grant Bartley. The basic pattern of human history, which I'm calling the primary cycle of history, is repetition of deep changes in thinking in society, political and otherwise. These basic changes we commonly call revolutions. Revolutionary change has elements we see repeatedly in history. For instance, having the new bold revolutionary vision is good for social progress until it becomes a tunnel vision, channeling us into new large-scale dysfunction and exploitation. In this latter phase of the basic historical cycle, the new vision of freedom often itself creates the chains which enslave the people. The very righteousness of our guiding principles strangles the freedom for which the principles were generated. Unchallenged, the basic pattern of history means that humanity is destined to fail its future too. For instance, suppose we do create an ecologically sustainable global economy. The ideals through which this revolution happens, whatever they're going to be, will start out as good, I'm sure, but will also turn out to be limited and ultimately socially damaging if never updated as the circumstances change. So what should be our response to knowing that revolution begets revolution? Well, one correct response is to start a meta-revolution. Economic, social and cultural processes and structures define the nature of life for those living in them. So presumably, the human condition can be improved by developing what we create economically, socially and culturally. The development of society depends on people's ideals. Ideals ultimately direct destinies, since our ideals ultimately direct our actions. And since the course of history depends on the movement of people, everything depends on where the thinking of the people is directed, on their ideals which direct their actions. Yet what would it take to get the direction of thought right, except discovering the right direction for it, then continually rediscovering the right direction? To meta-revolution. Shifts in the large-scale structure of human life are traditionally attempted through revolution. If we undertake a meta-revolution, in contrast to a revolution, we undertake to keep nudging the development of society in continually better understood directions. As we learn to grow beyond bad assumptions in the foundations of our culture, by definition we're learning how to create a better society. Progress must mean improving the social situation somehow. It can't just mean edging us from one bad social situation to another. Finally, learning from history would mean less and less deviations from the best of human life and development, until we're finally going in the right direction. So the attitude change I'm promoting in the meta-revolution is so we can guide life into the most intelligent world humanly possible. So we need a meta-revolution in thinking, even so that how we live our lives might become fundamentally right. If we keep positively nudging the direction of human growth on a social scale, this must eventually mean societies no longer being herded down the wrong avenues, as has been the case till now, generally speaking. We've been wandering from the path of the best way for society since the birth of society, I'm sure. The random events and reactions of history have certainly produced a gallery of societies not designed to maximally benefit the mass of citizens, to put it mildly. Instead, the messy processes by which the world has been constructed means that most people have been forced to endure unnecessary negativity. Human society, we could say, is chronically, basically dysfunctional. Don't you agree? If we collectively set our wills in the direction of a fully healthy global society, we could perhaps even begin to cure the deep-rooted resource and psychological problems of our species, and be happy as a species. Well, that would be real progress, wouldn't it? It would mean our recreation of reality would aim towards being the best it could be. So to have any hope of finally learning how to create the best developing future, we need an attitude of critical thinking about our fundamental social, economic, etc. ideals. One core thing this implies is that we should continually seek to understand and overcome the basic limitations of our ideal thinking and its immediate applications. In this way, a fundamentally improving society could eventually become possible. So let's do the Metarevolution. Outside events aside, the constant historic cycle of revolutions, of basic change following basic change, is necessitated by limited ideals being unsuitably applied, and all ideals are limited at least in the sense of not being applicable to every possible future circumstance without adaptation. As I argued in the previous videos, any application of ideology is prone to limitations and corruptibility. Any thinking behind any ideals could go wrong, especially in their adaptation. Intellectual spores of destruction nestle silently within any limited ideology, and that means all human thinking will become destructive when it's applied long enough without change. However, when we're speaking about idealism or worldview goals, we're speaking about the core of who we are and what we do. As I also argued in previous videos, the resolute application of limited ideals is the basic problem of history, in the sense that it's at least the base of the basic cycle of history. The resolute application of limited ideals is what causes revolution after revolution. Bad applied ideals can cause or necessitate basic change by accident, by negligence, that is, through intellectual complacency, or by the deliberate misuse of ideals. So it's my contention that not having a good way of dealing with the limitations in core thinking and ideals is a core problem for humanity throughout history. History often graphically illustrates the results bogus ideological certainty can have. For example, a strong case could be made that most imperialism is the result of ideological manipulation. You invade another country in the name of your country, or your God, or your political cause. Or let me again cite the certain rise in the 20th century of communism and fascism. Both these social experiments quickly turned into social-scale disasters for the victims of them. Speaking more generally, I suspect that if we stop peering closely, we'll see that the root of much of our most effective mistakes historically has been a certainty that the excuses for what we're doing are valid. Perhaps then we should feel the stab of regret as we look back to see the stupidities we could have avoided, if only we had chosen to use our critical intelligence more than our brutal mass credulity. All the war and hatred, genocide and slavery, all of that. Complacency towards applied ideals provides the crux of a lot of what's gone wrong historically. Societies don't react to what they're thinking and doing with enough insight to prevent many unnecessary disasters. I take this lack of basic behaviour critique as pivotal to why the past has been so disastrous, the present continues to be so bad, and the future will continue to go so wrong too if we don't plug up the gap. We have some insight that our consumerism cannot be the best ideal for life. Unfortunately, our economic order has become such that we have little choice or say about it. We have to focus on status via consumption in our modern society, especially if we want to reproduce, thus living lives that aren't quite right. You do know what I mean, though. Even without emphasizing the common fate of having to do the 9-to-5 thing you hate year after year. You know what I mean about the processes of society being not quite right if, for example, you're an unemployed single mum in a cramped high-rise building. The rent's going up and up, and you have to scrimp just to pay the interest on the loan for the TV. So this is progress, you might well ask. Untreated, the same basic problem of complacency in the face of ideological limitations will continue to corrode every coming cultural evolution or deep development, and so all our futures. We should well fear the hardship, wars, famine, torture, exploitation, hatred, and other self-righteous, self-destructive errors our intellectual atrophy will continue to create or allow, sometimes with idealistic fervour. If humanity doesn't change its attitude to its fundamental thinking, the future will include all sorts of unnecessary major motions of society continuing to go wrong, unresisted by understanding or awareness. Our destiny, by lack of popular demand, will continue to include the systematic abuse of the people through all sorts of persuasive, glittery, slippery, but ultimately false ideals someone charming will be persuading us with through the media. What history creates is non-linear. Non-linear means that the future is never a simple, predictable extrapolation from current trends. What happens in the saga of societies is never a straightforward continuation or expansion of what's happening now. So, like the weather or the churning waters of a mountain stream, we never know in any detail what sort of circumstance is going to be churned up for the future. There are too many variables influencing the outcomes. However, the meta-revolutionary point is, for long-term prudence and to truly progress, we must learn to harness the elemental forces of social change for social benefit. Human life won't fundamentally grow in the most sustainably beneficial direction until we resolve, as part of our development, to continually keep searching out the deep truth of our development. We'll need to overcome the way of not thinking about our ideologies and our ideals, which allows this spin of history to keep occurring. We can do this, I think, through increased cultural and social meta-revolutionary awareness. Naturally, it will be a narrow and rocky way forward. Briefly, the meta-revolution would involve making society critical of its core ideological thinking and keeping it critical. I could also say that the meta-revolution is about cultures becoming seriously non-deceptive to themselves about their true values for themselves, as demonstrated by their actual behaviour. It's an obligation of practical prudence, and so of ethics, for society to work continually to better understand significant truths about its goals and behaviour. You shouldn't want to spend your life working hard for what's false and so futile. Who wants to conscientiously build their life on what they know are worthless foundations? Similarly, I want the human race to have a chance of getting its ideals and goals right en masse. The meta-ideal is to repeatedly redirect the ideal growth of society towards being based on demonstrable ideological and other developmental truths. The central hope here is that if we work a meta-revolutionary attitude deeply into cultures, the meta-revolutionary aim is that our thinking about the world we're creating will continually be being rebuilt stronger from the foundation. There will be a continual undermining of the root of much of our basic misunderstanding and its applications. Perhaps even the deepest truth might be churned up out of it all and into society eventually. At least we'll be encouraging moving away from what's fundamentally wrong now, whenever now is for you. If we don't do this, we'll be continually reenacting the ingenious recreation of the world into a new bad social situation. Albeit that we're superb at making the social situation look like it's getting better. That is, until the tree starts to bear fruit. The central problem with our ideologies and our ideals is the extent of our lack of thinking about them. We endure bad or limited applications of ideals as societies because we lack effective criticism of them. Thus, the core idea motivating this meta-revolutionary manifesto is that uncriticality and applied basic social scale thinking is the source of the profoundest social problems. Perhaps a metaphor or two will make the principle clearer. To build a society on truth, it's necessary to do the groundwork for your building. The rubble of basic error must first be discovered, then it must be cleared away, so that we have clean space to build the city of our new ideals on. We're in trouble if we've still got rubble. Or, to obtain a healthy body, a poisoned person must have their system purged of pollutants and toxins, perhaps in the sweat of a feverish heat. The same is true socially. We can't be socially healthy through basic intellectual and ideological corruption. We need the false beliefs out of the system and true ones in, so society can thrive in health. It doesn't take much contact with history or the present to agree that arrested ideological awareness is a general truth of cultures, including our own. Our thinking can be so accepting that it doesn't even realize that there are ideological forces at work. Such is the state of human civilization generally, perhaps. Most people's analyses of their guiding ideals is only thinking about the practical details of how to achieve them. This ideological ostrich-likeness is a major root of much of our mass social errors, and also set to play a major part in any upcoming revolutions. Living with this unhealthy mindset is a historically very popular condition, though. It seems to be the default mentality of the human race, in between paradigm shifts in society and culture, by which I mean revolution. But it means there's nothing widely at work in societies alive and powerful which would encourage the checking and renewal of ideologies and their political, social and economic applications before the circumstances force them to change. In the most extreme cases of fundamentalism, there aren't even the means for minor adjustments to thinking. It'll be business as usual until inevitability takes its mudslide course. If you don't know what that means yet, it means history will overtake even your life. Even the primary cycle of history, one new way of thinking and living, eventually begetting another, can be thought of as a result of the complacent attitude to our erroneous or limited ideals. So we could say that by counteracting our bad attitude to our core goal thinking, perhaps even the basic cycle of history can be responded to intelligently. We might even eventually break out of the cycle of history by culturally nurturing gradual, deliberate ideological improvement. I want to suggest that we don't have to condemn ourselves to merely creating one set of new irritating conditions after another. We can choose to start to guide ourselves and our societies out of the maze of trenches dug by our social scale of thoughts and reactions. We can instead learn to basically improve the way we're recreating the world. Perhaps the most desirable thing about a meta-revolution would be our rebuilding the world in a way that evolves intelligently. A useful definition of intelligence is flexibility in responding to problems. If knowledge is awareness of relevant information, it's clear that both intelligence and knowledge are premium survival factors. Since if you're aware of what's going on, you've got a much better chance of intelligently reacting to it than if you're not. But our USP as humans is our relatively high knowledge and intelligence, exactly. Our superiority over the rest of the natural world is tied to our abstract thinking, which among other things enables better planning. And generally, any informed planning is much better than none at all. We need to use our high powers of mind to get the clan to successfully ambush a mammoth, for instance. It takes a lot of planning, which means a lot of mind power. So, Darwinistically, intelligent awareness is good. And if intelligence is an intelligent trait, then more intelligence is more intelligent. So intelligence must grow, even as a principle of intelligence. However, as long as no awareness of ideological change remains the dominant attitude, the human race will still be easy prey to the ideological forces which incessantly churn it about. As long as we're not ideologically aware enough to challenge the assumptions of our own applied ideals, we cannot be the masters of the ideals. Be as decisive and certain about the future as you want, there's still nothing in place to stop the new world from inevitably largely going wrong, so triggering another major turn in the cycle of history. The first useful stage in using awareness to overcome any problem seems to be becoming aware that there is a problem. And the essence of what I call the primary problem of history is that too few people question deeply enough what they're being led to believe they should be doing. Can we do anything to overcome the blockage in human thinking which facilitates the base historic cycle? Can we do anything, for example, to protect ourselves from future manipulations by the powerful and influential? What might overcoming the deep problem of history involve? We're looking to put into effective life an attitude which continually seeks to overcome our most fundamental errors in lives. This will involve waking up considerably. We could also say the way we respond to the ongoing need for fundamental change needs to fundamentally change. I call this change the Metarevolution. The message of a revolution within a revolution is starting to come out. Wisely changing our way of thinking about our ideal thinking will mean our working to conscientiously improve ideals and their application. I believe the point of departure must be becoming aware of having profound social, political, economic and other assumptions, then questioning them, then to systematically replace bad ideals with good, then questioning them, then to systematically replace bad ideals with good. The Metarevolution has as its goal the planting and working in the heart of society of a truth-searching, lie-overcoming, fundamental worldview and ideals questioning thinking. Or to formulate it more formally, the meta-revolutionary mission is to establish cultural scale responses to the needs to be continually re-seeking and re-implementing fundamental truths concerning ideologies. If you like, meta-revolution wants to instigate ongoing benign revolution, by which I mean deep change, not violent change. This is a high and difficult mandate. To achieve this goal evidently needs a firm planting of the meta-revolutionary attitude in the cores of cultures, and in particular in your culture. Meta-revolutionary minded subcultures must be established which will continually stretch and test the limits of present worldviews and ideals, and change them when necessary. Well, it's a tall order, I know. But in rare optimistic moments, I like to think that a high point of human cultural evolution will be the creation of a society invested into the possibility of overcoming its present deepest ignorance about its own ideals and their applications. For the meta-revolutionary person, practical wisdom has two faces. A meta-revolution is about being intelligently responsive to the changing times, and about being intelligently responsive to the fact that times change. The first part, intelligently responding to our circumstances, is revolutionary. The second part, intelligently responding to our responses to our circumstances, is meta-revolutionary. The revolutionary aspect concerns how best to respond to immediate social circumstances, but a meta-revolution goes one step higher, involving not just an analysis of circumstances, but an analysis of the changes of responses to circumstances. So first, the meta-revolution recommends careful ideological consideration so that a society might respond to whatever disastrous situation it is presently finding itself in as a result of applying its current ideals. But even more fundamentally, the meta-revolution recognizes the necessity of the continual critique of applied ideals. Indeed, the meta-revolutionary goal can be summed up as understand our ideals, apply this understanding, and keep on reformulating our understanding. One thread connecting the levels of thought is that the social circumstances are often the result of our responses to previous circumstances. But if circumstances are a result of responses, it would surely be good to understand the responses, even to the meta-level extent of understanding how the responses change through time. Meta-revolution is about the continual development of cultural and social ideals. Therefore, a good start for any meta-revolution would be to establish a culture of people asking, what would the best society and culture look like, given what we know now? What's stopping us from achieving that society and culture? Asking these questions in any given historical circumstance is only the first, revolutionary part of this approach, though. The meta-revolutionary would go further than the revolutionary to encourage a culture to continually ask what would a good society and culture look like and what's stopping us from achieving it. This means culture deliberately keeping revising what society should best be. Keeping asking what would make the best society and how could we aim towards that. Even to ask these questions when we think we've achieved it, which we won't have. To put it personally, to be a meta-revolutionary, you must first ask, in a revolutionary manner, what are the core problems with the goals my society is implementing? And how can I act to resolve those problems, individually or socially? But you become a meta-revolutionary by being aware that such questions need to be asked continually. So how could a meta-revolution in thinking be best practically achieved? How could we get a continual asking of revolutionary questions and a continual implementation of new answers? First, how might the ongoing asking of questions of ideals be established in cultural discussion? Working meta-revolutionary thinking into society might mean establishing a systematic ongoing study of society's goals and methods of achieving them. One way could be through meta-revolutionary think tanks or other foundations established to look into ideological questions. An Institute for Social Goals Research, we might call it. Not a great name, I know. Is the Ideals Institute any better? Meta-revolutionary theory is the study of ideals through history. We might instead call meta-revolutionary theory ideals theory. As I say, this study would ask questions like, what's right and wrong with our present ideals? Or, what might better goals and their applications be for the world, for society, and for families and people? How are ideals applied across time? And so on. Blueprints of our ideals, both real and professed, would be studied and their implications scrutinized even as we seek to implement them. Well, preferably before we implement our ideals. One evident way of starting investigating meta-revolutionary theory would be to take principles of knowledge mining from the physical and social sciences and apply them to ideological topics to chart the motion of deep social, political and economic value truths, such as examining the ideals one's economic processes are actually pursuing, and ideally pursuing. Among other things, copying science means applying the hypothetico-deductive method, which in one characterization can be said to be selective model making through a process of empirical data analysis. I don't want to try to imagine how implementing unforeseeable ideals will be done in unforeseeable circumstances, since what will need to be done in the future will depend upon what the new circumstances and ideals become. I've given my own ideals of what a good ideal or set of ideals for society might involve in other videos. But let me now invite you to conjure up in your own mind a truly good society. What would the best future society be like, do you think? Broader-minded views of progress might offer not just ever-improving technology for an ever-richer elite, but the improvement of life for most people, meaning the ongoing improvement of the social situation in which the struggle of life occurs for most. The core of a wise worldview would acknowledge that its thinking concerning its goals and their applications is imperfect and must continually change. Whether you're a Christian, atheist, Buddhist, communist, Republican, undecided, it would be good for your group to strongly bear in mind that whatever ideals you're implementing now are imperfect in their implementation and will need to change as both the situation and your understanding develop. It's better to know this than to not know it, or to deny it in some ultimately destructive manner, isn't it? I am a Christian, so this means I'd like to see the ongoing consideration of goals or ideals and their applications established in Christianity, both institutionally and personally. This means establishing in the Church effective platforms for critiques of the ideals and goals being pursued either by groups or individuals, and seeking ways to implement better ideal conclusions continually. And keep on re-implementing revolutionary knowledge too, of course, this being the meta-revolutionary injunction. Truth is well defined as the correspondence of a description to what it describes. Or more pithily put even, truth is an accurate description. Knowing truth, that is, knowledge of reality, is intrinsically valuable just for its own sake, regardless of what truth can do. But truth also opens up reality to us. Stridently seeking truth is the most intelligent thing we could do, since anything not true isn't worth relying on or following. And if we don't get the basic thinking right, everything derived from that thinking is liable to go wrong too. Sham knowledge is worse than useless, since believing you have knowledge when you don't gives your false ideals a false trustworthiness. So, the truth is the most precious commodity, the ultimate treasure. So, the best way a society can function is by having a love for truth working at the core of its cultural identity, even to the basics. Truth must survive every honest test. If a set of ideas is the truth, it will come out of the refining forge pure and sharp. Even if we could never demonstrate ultimate ideological truth, we'd still be right to nurture a fundamental desire to overcome ideological error, wouldn't we? You'll at least be aware that the ideas need modification. As I would put it, we need an active freedom of thought which conscientiously seeks truth to find it. Clearly, a desire for truth is already an instinct working to pioneer progress for humanity, having carved out the sparkling veins of knowledge with which humanity has been elaborately blessed. The novel aspect of the meta-revolution is not to suggest a search for ideological truth. The novelty is instead the idea that meta-revolution is about continually uncovering ideological truth for the foundations. Putting the meta-revolution in a nutshell, then, we can say, an intelligent response to history is to establish an ideologically searching critical thought across cultures through time, discovering what deep truths we can about the thinking by which we're reacting. This mandates the continual testing of ideals, even to the basics of understanding. Let's keep looking for ideal truth. So, meta-revolution involves a combination of deep skepticism and committed truth-seeking towards the ideals of society. Any protection against socially significant lies and errors depends on there continuing to be people perceptive enough to discover the flaws in the applied ideals. But they also need to be effectively vocal about their discoveries too. Indeed, the meta-revolution needs a subculture strong and resilient enough to continually make major ideological failings known to the larger culture. However, getting culture to take on this idea of deep progress towards deep truth is going to be the most difficult change. I hope you'll agree that we'd like to hope to get life right, or at least as right as humanly possible. However, we've seen that to have this hope of rational growth, we need the freedom to adapt even the pilot beacons of our ideals and goals. Importantly, meta-revolutionary thinking tells us that this scrutiny needs to be repeated. Wherever and whenever we are, we're going to be in some foundational thinking, with its resulting lifestyle. But the meta-revolutionary point is, any application of foundational thinking can be limited, erroneous, or unstable. Let me make it explicitly clear, I'm not focusing on political revolution, and I never was. I want to use our urgent need for eco-revolution to open a wider meta-revolutionary door. For me, the predicted coming revolution for sustainable global economics would only be a sideshow to the main event. The main attraction would be getting a culture committed to examining its ideals and the sources of its ideals as a serious discipline. If humanity develops a core, truth-seeking mentality at the basic ideological level, we might be able to spot future complacency, manipulation, and other problems on a social scale before they happen. So reach beyond the stars to where the hawks and eagles dare not fly. Thank you.